What happens when a political assassination leads to a media firestorm and a government makes a sudden, dramatic legal reversal? Well, today we're diving into a constitutional battle in Japan that, believe it or not, puts the very idea of religious freedom on trial.
And it all really boils down to this one huge question. Can a government actually force a religious group to dissolve based on civil lawsuits without any criminal convictions to back it up? That's the core of the whole thing, and we're going to unpack it right now.
So, how in the world did this all get started? Well, it kicked off with a national tragedy that, according to the source material, set off this kind of unprecedented chain of events, including a really fierce media campaign aimed at one specific religious group. Just look at how fast everything escalated. It starts in July 2022 with the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Pretty quickly, the media focus shifts to the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, or FFWPU. A month later, the ruling party says, "We're cutting ties." Just a little over a year after that, the government is in court demanding a dissolution order. The source even projects that by March 2025, that order is granted. I mean, think about that. From a public scandal to a massive legal challenge in just over a year. That's incredibly fast. And this wasn't just happening in courtrooms. The human cost was absolutely immense. The source material reports that, with all that media attention, members of the FFWPU faced an incredible number of incidents, over 20,000. We're talking everything from harassment and discrimination to people literally losing their jobs and even getting death threats. Okay, so that brings us right to the legal heart of this whole thing. The source argues that to even go after this dissolution order, the government had to do a complete 180 on its own long-held legal interpretation.
So, check this out. On October 18th, 2022, Prime Minister Kishida's government was super clear about their stance in Parliament. They said a dissolution order for a religious group had to be based on criminal law violations. Civil stuff, they explicitly said, just wasn't enough.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The very next day, October 19th, the position completely flips. Prime Minister Kishida announced that after, reorganizing their thinking, the government now believed that civil torts, basically unlawful acts in civil court, could be used to dissolve a group. The source points out that this overnight switch was so jarring that former prosecutors called it unnatural and totally arbitrary. So you might be thinking, okay, a legal pivot. Why is this such a big deal? Well, according to the source, this isn't just some technical legal argument. The claim is that this move strikes right at the foundation of religious freedom as it's been understood in Japan's post-war constitution. And to really get why, we've got to talk about this key concept, religious associational freedom. It's pretty simple. It's the right for people to get together and form religious groups without the government messing with them. According to the source, that specific freedom is exactly what's on the line here. And the source really hammers this point home. The historical context is everything. Under Japan's pre-war constitution, religious freedom was, limited. It always came second to a person's duty to the state. But the current constitution, the one created after World War II, was a direct rejection of all that. It calls religious freedom an inalienable and eternal right, specifically to stop that kind of government overreach from ever happening again. So what you have, as the source explains it, are these three interconnected pillars of religious freedom. The freedom to believe whatever you want, the freedom to act on those beliefs, and the freedom to associate with other people who share them. And it's that third pillar, the freedom to get together, that this dissolution order is seen as a direct attack on. And believe me, this wasn't just a local story. As this legal fight got bigger, the source highlights that it started to draw some serious concern from international legal experts and major political figures all around the globe. Let's take Patricia Duval, a French attorney who's an expert in international law. She actually submitted a report to the UN arguing that what the government is doing is a potential violation of an international human rights treaty that Japan itself signed. So the key takeaway here? This is now being talked about on the world stage as a human rights issue. And that same concern, it was being echoed over in the United States. According to the source, Paula White, who advises the U.S. president on faith issues, called the whole thing an infringement of religious freedom. I mean, that's a really powerful statement, and it shows that this case is being watched very, very closely at the highest levels of the U.S. government. So where does this all lead? What's really at stake here? The source material doesn't just end with a legal breakdown. It finishes with a pretty stark warning about the future of Japanese democracy itself.
It all comes down to this idea of precedent, kind of like a domino effect. If a government can dissolve a religious group based on civil lawsuits, the source asks a pretty chilling question. What's stopping them from using that exact same power against any other organization they don't like? A political party, a union, an activist group, you name it.
So let's just recap the source's final arguments. It's not just that this order violates constitutional rights. It's that it forges this dangerous new tool that could be used against any group. It hurts Japan's reputation internationally as a country that respects the rule of law. And ultimately, the source concludes this whole case is one of the greatest trials for Japan's entire democratic system since the war.
And so, that's what we're left with, really. The events in Japan, as laid out in the source material, force all of us to think about a question that never gets old. Where do you draw the line between the power of the state and the fundamental freedom of an individual? That is the question right at the heart of this constitutional crossroads.